afternoon. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know, I'm Swathi Young, 20-plus years as a technologist, 8-plus years leading AI/ML strategies, implementation teams, and I say sometimes these AI/ML projects that I've been leading have not always seen the light at the end of the tunnel. They always go to the graveyard sometimes. But today I want to shed light on some of the successful generative AI and machine learning projects that I've led. So how many of you use ChatGPT every day? Every hour? The $20 version? Yeah. So just to demystify what is generative AI and how we have come from machine learning to generative AI, not going too technical, but technical enough. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And this was, I think, a couple of years back, Google led the research in the forefront. And essentially what they created is these pre-trained models where, to oversimplify it, they take text messages or text and convert it into numbers. And the numbers are actually represented in three-dimensional vector space. And the correlation between text is represented by numbers that are close to each other in the three-dimensional vector space. So like I said, I'm oversimplifying this, but a lot of people who don't come from technology background really think this is magic. I have had multiple conversations with lawyers and other professions. They're like, oh, this is sentient, this is magic. No, this has a lot of math and science behind it, right? So just demystifying that. And so we do know that it's multimodal. It's not just text. It's music. It's generating videos and images. And how many of you have experienced more hallucinations in images? Because as I was creating this presentation, I tried to use ChatGPT to create images for me to be used in the presentation, which I like to do a lot. And I did all my usual suspects, ChatGPT, Gemini. Have anybody tried Mistral? It's pretty good. I like Mistral. It's from France, so one of those European babies. But it couldn't. Sometimes there's so much hallucination. I find more in images than in text. Haven't dug deep into what's the cause, but I think we all know that it's now multimodal. What are some use cases and the business benefits that you have seen? I would like to hear from the audience here. I can add much more to this list, hearing from my colleagues, hearing from other people in this area. So any use cases that you don't see up here, or that you see up here, that you want to add to? I know marketing, yes?
Sure. Logs, writing, starting where you don't want to start from a blank page.
Yes, great point. A lot of people don't want to start, yes?
Reading my mind as I'm coding stuff.
So is it like code snippets or reviewing the code?
It's actually as I'm typing code or cucumber specs or things like that, it actually looks like something I would have just about written.
Yes.
I think because, well, I'm sure it's because I write such awesome code.
So you're not threatened by it. Go ahead.
Market gaps analysis?
Market gap analysis, yeah. I've lost track of the use cases I've done. So again, one of my bio points is that I'm doing my executive MBA at Georgetown, graduating next week. Yay. Thank you. So it was a 22-month intense course, and it was interesting. It was as part of my 22-month experience at Georgetown that ChatGPT got released, and it was amazing to see Georgetown's professors' feedback or their take on it. Half of the professors were like, you shouldn't be using it, because executive MBA is a lot of writing and presentation. And what else can we do but use ChatGPT? But the other half of the professors were very, very creative. They wanted us to use ChatGPT, but add our, what I want to say is critical thinking to the process. I think more and more the sooner you think about embracing it rather than avoiding, especially in education scenarios, I think it's better. I don't know how many of you follow Ethan Mollick. So from those of you who don't know, I'd really, really recommend following Ethan Mollick. He's a professor from Wharton. I believe he was an entrepreneurship professor, but he blogs about generative AI really, really in depth, and a lot of use cases, especially in education, outside education, and business, and so on. So I will tell you a use case of generative AI that I'm currently leading an implementation team at a startup where I'm the CTO. The startup is called Sustain Chain, and Sustain Chain was established by United Nations to accelerate United Nations sustainability goals. And this platform is a utility for public good. It's a membership-based platform. And we have implemented a reinforcement machine learning engine 2 years back. So essentially, think of it as a LinkedIn for sustainability. And it gives recommendations. Hey, if you're working on reducing carbon emissions, connect with this impact investor. He or she is going to fund your research and fund your product. So that was the initial AI we implemented. But one of the challenges we heard from the members working on sustainability, these are innovators, grassroots organizations. We have about 2,000 members on the platform. One of the things we heard is, hey, it's so tedious for us to get on the platform because we do collect a lot of data about the innovation and sustainability. If they are removing carbon, we want to know what methods they use. They can also go to Interchange, where they can talk to other people working on it. So one of the things we heard is like, it's so tedious. We are typing all this description. We're typing the sustainability indicators. So this was one use case where we came up with leveraging generative AI to reduce the onboarding and the sustainability creators initiatives and augment it with our existing AI. So that's one use case that I'm currently involved with. At a very high level, this looks very similar to a traditional machine learning implementations. I've done a few. One was in the lung cancer research area. This was the traditional machine learning where we actually used a lot of CT scan data to automate the measurement of visceral fat, because the lung cancer surgeon found a correlation between visceral fat and the recovery time for a lung cancer surgery patient. So this was traditional machine learning, and we use these steps. I think where it differs for generative AI is the selection of tools, and there are a lot of inbuilt steps of selecting your large language model, whether it is open source or newer platforms, and that's changing so rapidly. And a lot of other work that I've done on is responsible AI. This was way back in 2018. Federal leaders, since we're all in the DC area, we can't escape from the federal agencies. So I was involved in working with federal leaders to work on an ethical AI framework. And this was way before AI became popular and ChatGPT. And we also worked during the pandemic, and we actually launched our ethical AI framework in 2020. I was one of the 10 co-authors of that framework, so responsible AI is very, very close to my heart. So obviously, when you want to do enterprise generative AI implementation, we start with a pilot. Like I said, a lot of pilots and prototypes that I led have not seen the light at the end of the tunnel. What do you think are some of the reasons these prototypes are like failing to go to production? Any guesses? Anything you have seen? Yeah, that's a good one. Too large a scope. Anything else? Data? Yeah, for sure. Anything else? Yes?
That what you thought it would do, it didn't do? Like what I'm
Yes, your objectives. So in my experience, whether I worked in lung cancer research, I think I worked on 4 projects for lung cancer research, and I worked on this sustainability initiative and others as well. In my experience, it's not starting with the business first problem in mind. Usually, we technologists, I am guilty of this. We love putting our heads down and I'll pick this tool, do this thing, start coding, right? So I think the more time you spend in analyzing what are the use cases, what are the business rules, or lack of business rules, because one of the use cases that I'm working with, there are no documented business rules, but it's there in someone's head. There is intuition, there's a lot of inherent rules that are being applied. So not spending enough time on understanding the business use case is the main reason most of these prototypes have failed. It's mostly not technology, a little bit data. Yes, sometimes the data is not, data quality is like ubiquitous. You can't escape from it. Most of the organizations have data, but it's not good data. But more often than not, it's mostly not putting business first in what is the problem you're trying to solve. So that's why I emphasize on what is your clear objective, what is your use case, and think of it as not just return on investment. So one of the use cases that I came to know in depth is McKinsey implemented a chatbot for their internal systems called Lily, and this is using generative AI. So first of all, they wanted to showcase to the clients that they were the first ones to implement generative AI at scale. But secondly, think of the business use case. It's a multi-billion-dollar company spread across multiple countries. So the chatbot is so effective. I saw a demo of it by somebody from McKinsey. It's so effective that if somebody says, I'm working on a merger and acquisition in a medical instrument firm, I want to know the strategy documents, past use cases, and the experts around the world. It just, boom, 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 it pops it up in a couple of seconds. So powerful, but they started with that internal use case and trying to solve the problem for McKinsey employees, whether they're a newcomer, whether they're an existing employee pivoting into another department. It was so effective. And they had then showcased their customers even before customers could adopt generative AI. So start with the objectives and the use case selection, and then what is the measurement of success? In fact, in Sustain Chain, the platform that I'm currently involved in, we were initially struggling a lot. We couldn't find what is our KPIs, right? So KPIs, is it increasing members, or is it trying to come up, because we are a nonprofit, how do we come up with a business model for the nonprofit? But what we realized is the KPI is going back to the mission of the nonprofit. The mission of the nonprofit is accelerate United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. How can generative AI help accelerate? So we had to work backwards and say, oh, if we integrate our generative AI with our existing AI recommendation engine, so it's connecting multiple concerned parties across supply chains, across impact investors, across innovators, nonprofits. So we had to go back to the drawing board to come up with a KPI. And the number of connections that are recommended by the AI engine, if the connections are being made truly, and then we can say that is a successful KPI to say, okay, then we are moving the needle towards accelerating sustainability. Someone said data, rightly so. So many steps for data, right? So all of us have data quality problems, feature importance, data conversion, labeling, outliers, and so on. So one of the things, apart from data cleaning, which we all have to do, data profiling, et cetera, one of the important things in this step to think about data is how can the outliers impact your outcomes? And if you usually have outliers this side and that side, and your graph is, the curve is going, it's very important not to cut off your outliers. because that outlier could indicate an actual person. Yes, you have anonymized the data. So one example I heard about the outliers is you're trying to collect all the data from hospitals, or even how many COVID vaccines have been administered in the United States, and you find there is no data coming from a particular town in Ohio or in the Midwest. And then you say, okay, most of the data we've got, let's just ignore lack of data in this particular town. But by ignoring, what you're doing is you're not understanding the context behind it. That could be because they don't have access to healthcare, right? So for you, it might be as a technologist and data scientist, it's very easy to ignore a data point. But ignoring the data point has some contextual reason behind it, could have ethical AI, responsible AI implications. You might be ignoring a certain sector of the population that doesn't have access, so think about that. And selecting the right generative AI tools, I've already spoken, this is like coming fast and furious. I would say a lot of things in this middle section, especially AWS Bedrock. AWS has invested in Claude, so Bedrock actually provides Claude and other large language models. And then you have your DevOps that is extended for MLOps and now LLMOps as well. Infrastructure, I think for infrastructure considerations, one thing to remember is we all know NVIDIA GPUs. If you are a huge, like a pharmaceutical company and want to develop your own LLMs, and I think Bloomberg have also developed their own LLMs, then the first consideration of compute power will be important. Otherwise, for most of us in the enterprises or startups, we're looking at storage and network considerations for the infrastructure. So I've spoken a lot about the responsible AI practices. One of the interesting things I've heard from my enterprise customers, especially I've worked with enterprise customers in the transportation sector and healthcare sector, there is a lot of fear about responsible AI. There's a fear about security of the data, and I'm sure there is a wide variety of organizations that you're all from where ChatGPT is either allowed or not allowed. That's at an employee level. But even at the enterprise implementation level, there is a lot of, considerations about risk, especially in regulated industries like financials and healthcare, obviously. So there's a lot of considerations in the responsible AIs. When it comes to responsible AI, I already mentioned the data, but there's a lot of things about data, like data lineage, data accountability, there's privacy and security concerns. And one of the things about implementing the APIs provided by ChatGPT is just like when you use your Salesforce SaaS platforms, they actually give you the information security audit report. ChatGPT, OpenAI actually will give you the information security audit report if you use their enterprise API version. So keep that in mind if you have to convince your business leaders about risks of privacy and security. Bias framework, so this one is a framework I have taken from the ethical AI framework that I had co-authored. So very, very important to look at this. I'm not going to go through in detail. It's quite busy, but I can share the slides later. So yes, some of the prototypes might be successful. Hopefully, the one I'm doing for Sustained Chain, we are targeting a launch date of September at United Nations General Assembly this fall. So the prototype might be a success, but it might not scale across the enterprise because of other things. There's also change management. There's also talent. So I'll quickly move into what are some of the challenges. There's technical challenges, operational challenges. But I think the main thing what I am seeing in the industry is talent, lack of talent. There's not enough time to train your current employees. There's not enough time to or budget to actually bring in external partners sometimes. So since I'm working at a startup, especially it's a nonprofit, we actually partnered with a talent firm in Europe, Eastern Europe, and South American machine learning, specifically generative AI developers. So think of partnerships. So this is a use case. If you want to read it, it's on OpenAI's website. We're running out of time. But these are some team members and skills that you want to think about. Again, I say that implementing any type of AI, generative AI or machine learning, is just not a technology solution. Think of it holistically, especially as there is more and more concerns about ethical, responsible AI, as well as governance issues. So think of it holistic team members and skill sets. Ecosystem partnership is important. I think with another client, we have actually partnered with George Mason University to do our first prototype of generative AI. So think of, since we are living in a vibrant university community here, think of partnering with universities for at least your prototype phase while you can either upskill your employees or find an implementation partner. Agile strategies, I'm preaching to the choir. You're all agile experts. And path forward, establish a strong foundation, especially think about the business use case, and then think of how you can use the data and the generative AI responsibly. That's all I have, and I'm there on all the channels to connect with me. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you. Great presentation. My question is this. What is the role of information architecture in responsible use for Gen AI? I hear a lot about data, 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 data. You know, my proposition is that it's difficult to design clean, exceptional experiences without a common taxonomy. We're all of a sudden dealing with all kinds of new types of data from new sources. What's the role of information architecture? I've yet to see a presentation in the past year on Gen AI that addresses information architecture, and I really think it's a missing link. Do you have an opinion or a point of view on that?
Yeah, I think information architecture is looking at holistically the value chain of your data. So, and how the data, and when I say data value chain, is how your data is initiated, lineage of data, and if you're a startup, you might not have a lot of data, to how the information, I think this is where your traditional data models, your logical data models, conceptual data models will interact with your business rules and your business processes, actually. So that's how I think of information management and this architecture. And the second question is, there's a lot of concern about governance. You would have heard about tools like Collibra, Elation being used for data governance. This is where they are looking very closely as to the origin of the information, whether it's coming from your third-party vendors. Obviously, large enterprises have a combination of everything. They have third-party vendors, they have in-house systems, transactional, warehouse, and all those systems. So looking at the lineage, looking at the metadata, and looking at actual who has access to that is becoming more and more popular in terms of your information management. But I would also overlay with your business processes and your business flow, because sometimes information could be residing in your Excel spreadsheets, residing in your emails even. So it's that end-to-end business flow, and overlaying is with the data flow and saying, okay, here are the gaps in information. Any